You're a dick.
Is your game done, Paul?
Yep. I see what you did there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I made some changes to the computer, which shouldn't have impacted anything in the podcast, and yet Skype would no longer boot. And so, in the past, I don't know, 48 hours, I had to redo all of XSplit. I had to redo all the settings in Skype, which is more complex than most people might think. And, yep, here we are.
You know, it's been one of those mornings.
Paul, you know what takes over 12 hours and still ongoing?
Yeah, I do. It's upgrading a Surface 3.
Yep.
You might have started that one in 2015, and then, maybe you would have been in time for the trip.
I vaguely forgot how slow this thing is. And,
yeah. Well, like I said, it's a nasty reminder.
well, here's the fun thing. Right now, it's hung up on trying to install a Defender update because, it goes through all the lists of things. Because why wouldn't it jump right? First off, side note, it's trying to jump to 1709 instead of 1803. So I'll have that to deal with. But, it opens Windows Update, and you see all those things, and it's like it's got to go through all these things before it gets to the one that you actually want it to get to. And it's being hung up on a Windows Defender update. It gets to 98% and then just sits there before it can update to 1709 because Defender is more important than 1709.
I miss the old days when the thing that used to hold up Windows Update was the .NET framework updates. Remember those things? They were always like these gigantic multi-step processes that you'd install the one thing, reboot, there'd be another one, you'd reboot, there'd be another one. And then after that, a bunch of stuff would come through. I miss those days.
Yeah. Back when updates were few and far in between, when I'm talking about major updates, not the twice annual update garbage that we're dealing with right now, because 1803 is a solid piece of code.
Yes, it is.
Yep. But Edge is marginally better, Paul?
Well,
that's what I wrote in the show
as
notes.
we discussed yesterday. And then from a battery life perspective, every version of Windows 10 since I think right before the anniversary update came out. So I guess technically that was the fall update. Microsoft has been touting the battery life advantages of using Edge over other browsers on that version of Windows 10. And I think they've released a blog post about it every single release.
Mm-hmm.
And a few others too, actually. They may or may not do that for this version, but I noticed on YouTube they posted a video last night or yesterday that was on this topic for the what are we calling it now? The Spring 2018 update, 1803. And I thought, okay, I'll write this up. This is always interesting. It is an advantage. But, the thing they're not really talking about, and this may explain why there's no blog post maybe, the gap between Edge and Chrome on Windows 10 from a battery life perspective has fallen dramatically. Like back when they first did this almost exactly 2 years ago, there was like a 30% battery life differential, giving you hours of extra battery life on Edge if you use that over Chrome doing the same thing. So it kind of varied by workload, obviously. In this most recent version, I think it was it 12% or 14%? I think it was 12%. Doesn't matter. It was somewhere in there. But it's really fallen, The battery life advantage over Firefox has remained gigantic. So I guess there's a big advantage there. But, we're getting to the point now where you could kind of make the argument that using Chrome for that additional functionality that you get nicely offsets what I would call a fairly minor battery life improvement when you use Edge.
Yeah.
Interesting. So much for that resource hog that everyone's so upset about. It's the thing that always comes up with, well, I went into Task Manager and I noticed this thing was using lots of RAM. Like, what are you watching it like a TV show? Well, just use the frickin' thing. What are you talking about? Like, I don't even understand this mentality.
I like to put my RAM aside for a rainy day.
Yeah, exactly. That's what my son and I had this argument over a video game. It was like he had gotten these kill streaks in some Call of Duty game, and I was, we were playing together at a friend's house, and I was like, dude, let's go use those things up. And he's like, I'm saving them. And I'm like, for what? They're there to use. The game's going to end. Windows in this case is fairly sophisticated about memory management. It's a thing they started working on in the 1980s.
Yeah, it's kind of important when you launch an operating system.
Yeah. Yeah, and look. Does Chrome consume more resources than Edge or whatever? Yeah, maybe in some cases. I'm sure it depends in your collection of extensions. Mostly. I've seen reports from people who claim that Edge uses more resources and whatever. I don't even. To me, that's not the issue. I bought all this RAM for a reason. I want it to be used. Thank you, Kat, for joining me again for the podcast and for screwing up my desk.
Your cat should just be called Windows Update.
Yeah, you're like what is it? What was the phrase? Not spontaneous execution, speculative execution.
Yes.
You are a speculative cat. I know. Jesus, so stupid. Oh, God.
You know, you and your cat have a lot in common. You just kind of appear when you're not really wanted.
That's right. You're curiously vocal when what we really want is silence.
While Paul is petting a cat, this map, the desert map Miramar, is coming to the Xbox. It might even be out now. But I can tell you that this latest update that they're pushing out to the Xbox is hot garbage, and it has been a very bad experience. It would be the 1803 of PUBG updates, to the point that the game just crashes. And what's a lot of fun, Paul, a lot of fun here, is if you're in a vehicle, you and three buddies, so there's four people in a Jeep just driving across this open desert, and the driver crashes, his game crashes, which happens. What happens in that instance is that the driver continues to drive at full speed straight ahead, while the other three people are in the vehicle trying to figure out what to do. And you can't jump out of the vehicle because you die, so typically what you have to do is assassinate the driver, and before he...
At least there's a solution. Sometimes in Call of Duty, when there's a lag issue, you'll see a player will kind of appear in a door, and then he'll slide very neatly across the room through the wall. And as you're watching that happen, he's really never moved, so he just shoots you. You know, it's the most annoying of lag kills imaginable.
Yeah.
You're the most annoying of lag kills.
I don't know. For as long as this game has been out, as much as it's been hyped up, it's not exactly a great showpiece for the Xbox One X or anything in that capacity.
Yeah, so I'll be publishing my article about this shortly, but what I had started writing was PUBG's popularity is inexplicable. This game debuted with exactly one map, one game mode, and no respawning, and the performance on Xbox One in particular is terrible. Yeah. And yet, there are like several million people playing this thing on Xbox One.
At any given time.
Arguably the worst possible experience you could have playing this game.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. The frame rate is bad. The game experience isn't great because of the crashing. I mean, you're worried 50% of the time that your game's going to crash, 50% of the time that you're going to get sniped.
The visuals aren't great.
Yeah, the visuals are just, whatever. Yeah. And yet, here it is, and I can't stop playing it. It is a hell of a lot of fun.
I've said this a million times, but every time I look at it, I think to myself, why doesn't Call of Duty just add a map and game mode and call it PUBG, or something? I mean, like, I look at these maps and I think, like, Call of Duty has already solved the performance and the visual quality issues. It has, all the weapons and whatever the perks and everything. I mean, like, it would be a good, they could do this.
They could. The big, I think, challenge is that there's quite literally 99 people on a map, as opposed to 4 on 4.
That's true.
8.
That's true. Yeah, so that's a good point.
That's probably...
Battlefield, is kind of famous for those big maps with lots of players. Of course, that's a slower moving game. It's more of a stealthy kind of a thing, I guess. Well, I mean, I think there's room for smaller maps with fewer players, right? Yep. You could do that kind of thing. I mean, I think the big issue I have with PUBG is just the lack of variety, Like, because regardless of how it would be implemented, like, I think of this as a mode of a game. Like, this would be one of the game modes. You could play team multiplayer, deathmatch or whatever. You could play, they have different versions of them, like the hardcore versions and so forth. Like, it would be one of a matrix of game types, but it's just like this one thing. And it's curious to me.
Yeah, they are
why it's so popular.
On the PC experimenting with more game modes. But the big problem here is that they're moving so slow. And if they move any slower, then they will actually be going backwards in time, which would be an incredible feat of engineering.
Half the map size with half the number of players would, I think, be perfectly acceptable to most people.
So they did do a map, quite literally half the map. This is what's called an 8x8. The one called Savage is a 4x4, but it keeps the same number of players, and it's insanity. But
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good in its own way because
yeah.
in a game with no respawning, if the game goes faster, that might be a better experience.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we'll just wrap it up here, Paul, because I know we've talked about this a couple times, and I'm honestly just wondering if the podcast is even going to work because, thank you, Skype, is Andromeda Dreams and Awakenings.
Yeah. I struggled most with the headline on this one. I think you've seen this before, and maybe we're all guilty of this kind of thing too, but in the tech kind of enthusiast world in particular, there's this, we have a way of speaking with authority about things that we know nothing about. I could put something on Twitter and then some guy will have this big, well, Microsoft is working on something called Core OS that is blah, 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 blah. Like he's on the team. He has no idea what he's talking about, right?
Yeah.
And I think we do that kind of thing a lot. And when I look at the information that's out there about Andromeda and compare it to the information that I know to be true about Andromeda, there's kind of a gap there. And there are things I don't know a lot about. I don't have a lot of firsthand information about the seashell thing, for example, or Polaris in particular, but I do have some information about Andromeda for some reason. So, I feel good about my sources on that and, whatever. But I look at like what people write with such authority. This is what this is, and this is what this is, and this, and it's like, really? I mean, I'm not sure you know what you're talking about. So I just kind of wanted to address this week's revelations. The Walking Cat had posted some stuff from the most recent RS5 SDK, which does reference Andromeda. He does things like he's smart. He has good, he gets good information, but he also does this little bit of extrapolation where he kind of refers to as /Andromeda OS. And if you look at the document that he's quoting from, it never says that, and that sort of assumption it's a speculation that the OS for Andromeda will be something different, when in fact I've been told it's just Windows 10. In fact, I was explicitly told this is not some new mobile variant of Windows 10. It's just Windows 10. And, I think we just get caught up in this kind of thing a little bit. So I kind of laid out like, here's what I know. Here's what people have speculated. Here's a couple of additional things I'll speculate. I'll call them educated guesses. And, here's where we are today. I think the last time I wrote about Andromeda was back in January. I mean, there just isn't a lot to say about it. I mean, I think people get excited every time it comes up.
Because when you're grasping at straws.
That's the thing I addressed in January, like trying to level set the expectations there. I mean, this is not, and people still get very offended, that I even try to do that. It's like, well, you don't know, they could own mobile again. It's like, I feel comfortable with the fact that that's not going to happen. But the question remains, will they release it? And I think they will. And it goes back to the ebook store. Microsoft, like I said yesterday, they didn't put an ebook store in Windows 10 so you could read books on a computer, like a traditional computer. You can do it. I mean, that will, I'm sure people are doing it like the goons that they are, reading a novel on a laptop. But it was really designed for these kind of new form factor mobile devices. And reading is going to be part of it. And that suggests to me that they will put it out, right?
Yep.
Yes, kitty cat. I know. I'm sorry.
You've neglected the cat.
She's
for 8
upset.
seconds.
She's upset that the music store is gone from Windows 10. I know. It's okay. Spotify's good. Yep.
So when are you leaving for Boston? Not soon enough?
Yeah, exactly. First thing tomorrow morning. So my goal is to be there in time to do the podcast from my friend's house. And like I said yesterday, if you see me in a car on my phone, you will know that we did not make it.
Yeah, this actually has me thinking about how the podcast is going to work when I'm on vacation. There's a very good chance that it may not.
Right. How long are you gone?
10 days.
And when are you leaving?
A week from today.
Okay, so we have time to talk about it, but as we've discussed in the past, I mean, I think it makes sense in some cases, like you should enjoy a vacation and we should take some time off.
I wouldn't mind doing it once. Well, first off, the thing is I've got to run it from this laptop, which will be interesting to see if it actually can handle it on its own. Like
when I go, when I do the home swap this summer, we're going to be gone for 3 weeks. I intend to take one of those weeks off.
Sure.
So we should take that week off from this show.
Yep.
I'll do the show the other days. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you right now, next Thursday and Friday, it's not happening. That's a given.
Yeah, so if you can squeeze one in somehow or whatever during that time, it'd be cool. I'm sure it's cool in a way just to do one from where are you going? You're going to Florida, right?
Yep, going to the beach.
Yeah,
sit in the sand.
But yeah, I mean, we should not feel bad about having to take time off. We do this thing every goddamn day, Brad. Oh wait, are we on the air?
Your cat is actually just coming in because it's pissed off that you're waking it up from a nap.
She's going to be confused during this time period where I'm not talking to nobody, and she assumes that what I'm doing is saying, "I wish I could pet a cat."
She's not wrong. So, you got anything else today, Paul?
No, I guess not.
Good.
How about you?
No, I got nothing. I wrote up the new features coming to SharePoint Server 2019, which I know everyone is very excited about. So you can go read that on Petri if that's what you're...
Yeah, I wrote up new features coming to Mixer. So, we both have our own little...
Yeah, Mixer turned 1.
Process to bear.
Isn't it Mixer?
Yeah, which is a little cheap because it's really just a rebranding of the thing that came before it. Remember, it's not like Mixer was actually a brand new thing. But that's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's 1 year Mixer. It's cool. We can pretend.
We'll be happy. All right. All right, folks. So that wraps it up for today. We'll be back here tomorrow live. Actually, I'll be back here tomorrow. Paul will either be in a car and or in a house. And have yourselves a wonderful Thursday, and we'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can find us at thurrott.com/live for that show and all the calamity that brings with it. Have yourself a good one.